Dick Tappendam. I was born at a little farm down in Lenham Heath. My father had a little farm and a little slaughterhouse there. We moved up to Lenham in about 1947, and that's where my life really began.
How old were you when you left school?
Oh, I was 15 when I left school. Yeah, I left school. My school was just really an interruption of getting down to local slaughterhouse at night to sort of help them down the local slaughterhouse, which was in the village of Lenham then, behind the butcher shop in Lenham, and it was just a little place that used to kill just for the immediate area, really.
And that was in the market square?
That's in the market square, yeah, right on the corner of the market square. Well, that's all gone now. That's houses built on that. Old people's houses are built on that now, and that's all sort of disappeared. But then when I left school, I went to work at Charing, at the little slaughterhouse at Charing. Also, as I'd been going down there from school, I was really almost a trained man before when I left school and when I started work. But that's how it all carried on. But yeah.
So you started at Charing. What sort of time was that?
That was in 1956, 1st of April 1956. That's.
And who owned the abattoir?
Well, the abattoir was owned by Hogwins, the butchers in front, but it was run by a fellow called Jack Coveney, and it was only in a small way really for a start off, but it did because the control come off the meat in 1955. It was really expanded. The meat trade really expanded, and we really did a lot more there than the place was really capable of doing. If you remember what I mean. But well, it was actually years ago. Work was you did work harder, didn't you? You had to put more into it years ago, didn't you, than what you have to do now.
What sort of hours did you work?
Well, we used to work from 7 o'clock in the morning to somewhere about 11 o'clock at night, sometimes 12 o'clock at night, and we used to do that sort of maybe 4 days a week. We used to work Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, and there was, a peculiar thing where you used to work like Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. On Saturday mornings, our cattle was all kept down behind the Swan Hotel on that marshland there, and
I'm not being a village person. You say marshland behind the Swan.
The Swan Hotel.
Is that the new Swan down on the main road?
On the main road, yeah. There's a marshland by there. There's a little alleyway goes down between Ron Law's house and the what is now the Chinese restaurant, and we used to get about 40 or 50 cattle up in there, let back the ones we didn't want, and the others, I'm talking about 1956, 7, 8, 9, somewhere there. The others we used to run along the main road in a drove to the Queen's Head, up the High Street and into the slaughterhouse. We used to do that with about 30 cattle, and the women used to stand on the pavement with their kids in their pushchairs, and the cattle used to run up the street. Nobody used to take any notice of it. But God, health and safety people wouldn't let you do that now, would they? But actually, I've got my father had an association with that slaughterhouse actually. As a young lad in the 1418 war, he worked for Homewards at Pluckley, and they'd got a slaughterhouse there, but all the men was away at war, so my father, he was sort of like 16, 17, would have been almost ready to go. He used to bring a drove of cattle with 2 or 3 other boys of his age or young men, and they used to run them out of Ashford Market on a Monday and walk them along the road from Ashford. They used to get to the Hare and Hounds at the top of it there. They used to go in there and have a drink and just let the cattle and the sheep wander, because the road, the A20, wasn't like it is now. It was only just like a big lane, was it? And they just used to let them wander, and they'd have a couple of drinks in there and then go on and go take them all down into Hoffield and leave a couple of cattle there and about 8 to 10 sheep in the little slaughterhouse at Hoffield, which was right next to the school. There was a little slaughterhouse right next to what is the new school now. There was a butcher's shop there. In my time it used to belong to a man by the name of Spicer, but I don't know who it belonged to back in the turn of the century. And they used to leave like a couple of bullocks and about 8 to 10 sheep there, and then they'd take the rest on to Charing, the place where I worked, and leave maybe 5 or 6 bullocks and 20 sheep there, and then they'd take the rest down to Pluckley, and they'd do that all on a Monday after market. And the next day, presumably, the 2 or 3 boys, they would go back round these slaughterhouses and do the killing. So it was a bit, unusual, really, for now.
Sorry, how many hours did you work?
106.
And what age were you?
16, I think, by
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. And how much a week did you earn?
£3, 10 shillings.
Then you had your tax and that taken off.
Well, no, he used to pay me. He was a bit casual, so I used to get it straight in cash in my hand.
But even so, 106 hours.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, you said that your dad owned this little farm.
Well, he rented the little farm, and he made a little slaughterhouse. It was a double loose box, really. And he built a copper in the corner of it, and for boiling water, and started killing these pigs for the South Suburban Co-op. But the thing about it was the drainage, which was all right for when horses was there. It used to drain into the pond and it was absorbed. It was only really urine and that sort of thing. But once you got killing other stuff in it, it polluted this pond a bit, and the ducks used to lay their eggs around the edge, and we would have the duck eggs because we weren't allowed to eat the chicken's eggs because you could sell chicken's eggs. And the same with the milk. We had to have goat's milk, but cow's milk you could sell cow's milk, but you couldn't sell goat's milk. So we had to have the goat's milk. And also, I had an uncle die of tuberculosis back in the 30s, and cow's milk carries tuberculosis, but goat's milk doesn't. You don't get goat. So we had to have the goat. It was another reason why we had to have the goat's milk. But a thing about it was only about 50 yards away from the pond. It was only about 50 yards away from the well where we got our water. And so it must, over the years, have seeped down into what's the name, got in it. But people didn't used to like the water that came there, but it didn't affect us. But because we'd got used to the bacteria that was in it, you see.
Built up a resistance.
Built up a resistance.
Yeah.
But that was the story of that, and then father and his father fell out, and that sort of messed that up a bit. We had a period, just us personally, we had a period where we went to live in a tent, 2 tents actually. There was 4 children and mother and father, and they went fruit picking all the way through the season, and we lived with the gypsies and lived in these 2 big bale tents. And they went apple picking right through, strawberry picking right through to apple picking, and then when it got too cold, father he worked picking Brussels sprouts, which you usually do that when the snow's on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But that was. Then we got into a house after that again. It was only just, I suppose, a bit of a whim that father had that.
Right, so how long did you work at the abattoir?
Well, I've worked there from 1956 to now. I still do 2 days a week part time.
Do you really?
So it's 53 years.
What age are you now?
I'm just coming up for 68.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
keeping your hand in still.
Well, yeah. It's been a bit traumatic the last sort of 10 years, as because of the BSE and and several foot and mouth disease outbreaks and that sort of thing. It's been very, very traumatic, really, for the meat
What
trade.
happened back in the 50s and that? Because there used to be foot and mouth, but
Oh yeah, I can remember.
but they seem to cope locally with it.
Yeah, I can remember. I should think it was when we was down here, so it was before 1950, before 1960. We had a foot and mouth outbreak where you couldn't take when you sell things in the market. They still had the markets, but you couldn't take things out of the area. There was live things out of the area, and Charing was just out of the area, and there was a week where the stuff that was bought in the market was taken to Ledger's slaughterhouse at Smardin, a little tiny place. Jack Coveney was down there. He used to be down there and kill the things, and bleed them, and they was put on a cattle lorry and brought up to Charing, and we used to dress them up at Charing. And when we come down because you work late at night, where the lorry had backed in with these dead animals, and you carried these dead animals in. The next morning when you come and it was light, there was a big line of thick blood all laid along the path where you hadn't seen it the night before, but that's what.
The process. What happened to the waste product from
Well,
there?
the waste was all collected by people that in that industry. The fat was all collected, and the intestines, all the waste intestines and paunch emptyings, the ruminant was all sort of taken away. Well, the ruminant we used to put on Stanhomewood's field up across the field there.
Sorry, you're saying?
The rumen, the grass that's been eaten, that's all the residue grass that's in a it's in like a big bag
within the cattle.
Within the beast, yeah, and you cut it out. It has to rot down a bit because it's all acid and that, but when it's been on the field for 3 or 4 months, and plough it in, it's okay. The only thing you couldn't get rid of is pig hair. Pig hair was the worst thing. It didn't rot down at all. You could keep ploughing that up year after year. Yeah, and you accumulated quite a bit of pig hair.
So these are the tools of your trade.
These are the tools of the trade. Actually, they are the proper tools of the trade. This actually it's not one that's ever been used. It's one because they deteriorate and they're gone and they wear badly, and you don't really find them. But I've had it made up just to sort of give you a bit of an idea on how the procedure went. It's a we call it a scud, but it was built. The process of getting the hair off pigs, they have to be put in a big tub of water, not boiling water as the name scalding suggests, but of water about 135 degrees, and that just loosens the very surface skin and the hair. And after that, once that's heated to that, you can scrape it, and you scrape it off like that. But these was things that was made out of a bullock's hoof and just a piece of metal.
Sorry, you say it made out of a bullock's hoof?
Yes, just out of a bullock's toenail, because that shape was what fitted people's hands, if you know what I mean. And then you would scrape the hair off the pigs with that.
So the pig's carcass would be after it being killed. The pig's carcass would be put into hot water.
Put into hot water. It'll be put into a big round barrel, like half of a big wine barrel, if you can see what I mean. And you'd have a mixture of water in there. You had to get it to about 140 degrees, and you could tell that by experience if it was hot enough. And once the hair started to come off, the hair started to pull, then you could scrape it, and you could scrape all over the pig, and it would all come off, but it would be a fairly quick process, really, because it did come off, and the hairs come off as well as the first layer of the skin. If you got it too hot and it started to burn into the second layer of skin, then it deteriorated. The keeping quality of the carcass wouldn't have been there. Then it would
So again, it's a little skill of the trade.
Yes, it was. Yeah. But I say I had this made up because just to give you a bit of an idea on what the implement was, what we used. But that's not.
Just hold it up in front.
That's
of you.
a new one. It's not.
Just keep it still.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, right. It's again, it's sort of the thing you make up, but it was very versatile and did the job.
Yeah. Now this is a lethal looking instrument, but really from the beginning of time till about 1930, this is what they used to kill cattle with. And it's really, I suppose, only something that was made up by the village blacksmith, an axe head and a pole part on the end of it, and it didn't need really much of a clout because of the weight that was behind it to get that to penetrate the skull and kill.
So that's why they call it a pole axe.
It's a pole axe, yeah.
If you just hold it up in front of it, like that.
Yeah.
So, which part of it would be used to kill the?
This part would be used to kill the pole part of it. That would be used to kill. This end they just used to use that to chop the horns off, and that sort of thing.
And that was quite effective.
It was very effective. Yeah, it didn't. It didn't. Well, obviously you had to be a certain skill to use it, but you didn't very often make a miss-hit once you knew how to do it, because it's not a very big handle, and you don't need much of all that power on that one place.
That was on the side of the skull.
Well, right, no. Oh. You made a cross between the eye and the ear, and then right on that cross.
Right to the front of the skull.
Yeah, right in the middle of the skull there. And there's an area that big, which sort of like 4 inches in diameter, that you get anywhere in that space would really knock a bullock down. So that.
So though it looks.
Though it looks like it's a hit and miss thing, it's not really.
A very efficient.
Yeah, it's quite an efficient method. Yeah.
And so, as you say, useful.
I say this is an old one. I should think that would have been a little bit longer in its time, but because you have to just sharpen them there on the inside to make it so it'll penetrate. So there's a better area there.
And so the cattle would come in. Would they be tethered at all?
Yes, you'd have a mechanism whereby you'd put them on a rope. Or a chain. Actually, we used to use a chain with a loop on the end, be around their neck, and you'd walk them into the storehouse, and the chain would go through a pipe, but in that pipe there was a thing that used to drop down, so the chain would go through, and if the bullock pulled back, that would lock back and lock the chain. So you'd lock it down to a surface, so to a ring, so the bullock would be down there and it would be still and it would be no problem, you see. That is how it is. These are actually authentic tools. I think this steel was about a 1930 steel, which
it's for sharpening up the knife.
Just for honing a knife, just like a barber puts a strop on a razor. And just sort of 2 strokes either side on that would be all it needs. And cattle, in them days they used to chop cattle down with these. They'd be hanging up on their 2 back legs, and you would chop the spine right down the middle of the spine to expose the the spinal cord and the meninges, and that you do that, and there again that was quite a skilled process, because the vertebrae that are sort of maybe shaped like that, with the spinal cord in the middle, you had to chop them right across there, so you got the same amount either side, or else one man would be complaining that he's got all bone on his side of beef, and the other bloke he's got none. So he didn't want that. So you had to get them as close as you could to even. And there's another steel that's from pre-war, but this was the thing in 1936. It became 1936 or 7. The law changed and you had to shoot animals, and this was one of the first gun that my father bought in 1936 for shooting animals. And these are only basically, they fire a blank, like a blank 22 cartridge. It is quite a lethal weapon, really. You fire a blank 22 cartridge, you put it in there and fire it, and that pushes out a bolt that will come out about that far. And it comes out with a pressure of about sort of 3 tons per square inch, so it does whatever it's supposed to do.
So a modern version of the poleaxe.
Well, it is, yes, but I mean,
same principle. That would be.
We still have them now, but we still kill cattle with guns now, but they are more modern, if you know what I mean.
So with the skilled people working, about how many animals would you get through in a working day approximately?
Well, down there was an old fella, his son, and me, which were like maybe 3 generations on it there, and we used to do about 150 sheep in the daytime, and maybe 15 or 20 calves we would do on a market day, and all our, because of the fact that we were so busy and there was limited for room, all our pigs at that particular time was killed at another place. We used to have 60 or 70 pigs killed at a place and go and collect them with a lorry at night. But we didn't only do that, you see. We used to cut meat and sell meat in pieces to some of these big butcher shops. We used to have a big round in London. In Brewer Street, London, there was a shop that you would sell, what would be sort of like a quarter of a lorry load, really, to this one big shop that they didn't want to go to Smithfield, because the Smithfield meat had all travelled from Scotland and Wales and that sort of thing. They preferred to have meat that was locally, really.
Yeah, and fresh, quite.
Yeah,
and probably slaughtered the day
killed
before.
the day before, yeah. And there was quite a big trade there. We used to cut them into big primal cuts, like legs and shoulders and like what they called chines and ends and hinds and hens. And we also used to do sort of like guards of honour and mock ducks, where you'd have a shoulder of lamb and roll it up, and the leg, to look like a duck there, which they used to like. But they was the sort of things that now, if you go to a butcher's college now, they teach you at the butcher's college. But I mean, you used to pick them up in your just ordinary working life.
That's
really.
right. That was how many apprentices worked. They worked beside a skilled man.
That's it.
And was taught the trade. He would tell them what to do.
Yeah.
So overall, how many would worked in the Charing abattoir?
Well, there was only 3 of us that worked in the old place up by the church. There was only 3 of us worked there, and the governor, he used to come along and do the loading, and do the paperwork when we was doing the loading. We used to start loading the lorry about 8 o'clock at night and finish about maybe 10, 11 o'clock. Sometimes 11, depends what time we managed to get started.
It surprises me in that the hours you worked, you brought the animals in, And at the end of the day, the prepared and dressed meat was going on the lorry to London.
That's
So
it.
just
Yeah,
the-
it was. It
just
was
the
all
three-
that day.
Just the three of you did
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and it was a bit. You say it's difficult, but I suppose it was something that you accept, and you gradually do a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, and you know you're winding up doing a lot, but you really don't realise you're doing a lot. If you know, you just add a bit more onto your day, don't you? And,
The palace yard.
yeah, I know. I used to go in there sometimes 10 o'clock at night and get straw. If we had anything laying there overnight, I always used to go in and get a couple of bales of straw and to bed them down. And I can remember going in there one night, and it was all quiet and dark and eerie because wasn't very old really, and I could hear like. And I thought there's an old tramp in here asleep somewhere, and it turned out to be the owls up in the beam where you can hear owls.
The big barn.
In that big old barn. The owls make that sort of noise, don't they? Yeah, I think I would.
You mentioned that you sometimes work Saturday and Sunday morning.
Oh, every Saturday and Sunday morning we work.
Because I was just thinking that probably more people went to church in those days, and
Yeah.
I wondered, that, as you say, their attitude, they would go to church on a Sunday morning with the abattoir operating.
We had an agreement with the vicar, because these guns, these make a terrible noise. They do. We didn't. I can't remember the exact times now, but we didn't kill things. We made sure we was having our breakfast between such and such a time and such a time when people was walking to church.